Stand together.
Ow!
Look at me.
Run around again, and I was just like, are you serious? And then I didn't say anything else.
By modern-day standards, the actions of the Myall Creek murderers were war crimes and part of a deliberate, state-sanctioned genocide of the Aboriginal people that today would be punishable by the rules of international criminal law. The fact that vast numbers of genocidal murders in colonial Australia went unpunished would today provide evidence of state sanction and would today justify international intervention in the prosecution of the perpetrators and their national leaders. While such laws did not exist in 1838, the approach taken by John Hubert Plunkett towards the two trials was consistent with them and demonstrated an enlightened and visionary attitude that was unparalleled in his time or for more than a century afterwards. John Plunkett did not just prosecute 11 men for murder. He prosecuted his entire society for its connivance in the attempted annihilation of the Aboriginal people and their culture. His contemporaries, consciously or subconsciously, appreciated that fact and as a result vehemently resented him during the trial and for years afterwards. And it was a testament to his persistence and tactical skills that he was able to convince 12 white jurors to convict 7 of the perpetrators, because they were not only condemning those men to their deaths, but also stingingly rebuking their own society. While the trials and the convictions did not prevent future massacres, they stand as a beacon of humanity and interracial justice that illuminated the way for Australia to develop as a civilised nation. Australian schools, both primary and secondary, have always devoted a lot of time to teaching students about the great white explorers, people like John Oxley, Charles Sturt and Major Thomas Mitchell. Very few schools, even today, teach what almost invariably happened within a few years of the discoveries of the great explorers. The expansion of white pastoralists into areas that had previously been occupied by Indigenous clans for millennia, the expropriation of their land, the destruction of their culture and society, and the massacres of tens of thousands of them in hundreds of locations throughout Australia. In my opinion, the story of what happened to the Aboriginal inhabitants in colonial times should be taught in all our schools as readily as we teach the exploits of the great explorers. The two accounts are inextricably intertwined. One almost inevitably always followed the other. A real acceptance by mainstream Australia of the horrors that were perpetrated against our Indigenous communities in the colonial period will bring with it an understanding of the long-term trauma that has been transferred down the generations until today. We readily recognise that the trauma of other genocides and crimes against humanity, those such as during the Nazi period in Europe, in the former Yugoslavia during the 1990s, and in countries like Rwanda and Cambodia, we recognise that they can be deeply felt for many generations after the killings have ended. If we recognise that Aboriginal communities were subjected to massacres in a multitude of locations all over Australia for more than a century, there may be more sympathy for the current generations striving for equanimity, understanding and acceptance. Until we recognise that what occurred was a war of extirpation, of annihilation, until we recognise that what was perpetrated amounted to an attempted genocide, that today would be recognised as a war crime, and until we teach this to our children throughout Australia, we will not have reached our full maturity as a nation. Thank you very much.